Hey everybody, I'm back. I just wasn't done talking about my topics. So instead of waiting till next time to unravel or unpack, I wanted to finish unpacking. So I just want to continue part two of this discussion, talking about why people stay and what made them leave. And I was talking to Born to Reach, so I would still probably, I'm going to go ahead and let him know what's going on. And I'm going to just invite a couple more people back. But for me, I think one of the things that I am excited to talk about is, or tell you guys about, is just there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I'm very transparent on these shows because I feel like if nothing else, hopefully it will help somebody else. So for me, what's up, Q? Welcome back. For me, if I can be transparent and real and honest and share my healing and learn from other people's experiences, or even give somebody a voice that doesn't have one, I'm making a difference, and that's important to me. So that's why I do this anyway. So if you have never tuned in before, this is part two of our Transformation Tuesdays. And we have been talking about a village, which you can hit up part one, where I'm talking to Q, and then I talk to Born to Reach as well on the topic, just to kind of give some male perspective of the things that we're talking about, because I know it's always great to have both sides. And then as of right now, we're going to dive back into why people stay. Or at least from our point of view. A lot of this stuff is just our experience and our point of view. I have been in a domestic abuse relationship, and my parents were very much a domestic situation, so I know a lot about this situation. What's up, Mrs. Bagsby? Welcome back. So it's something that has a part of my heart that I just want to share, that I want to speak out to, that I want to build awareness of somebody that may not know what's going on, or has seen a change in their family, friends, kids in the family, different things, just to keep a watch and just do your part to make sure that we do the best we can, right? But I feel like there's always more we can do. So that's why I do these shows, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about a little bit more. So as far as why they stay, we covered a little bit about it. Sorry, I'm just trying to open my computer and it's tripping right now. But as far as why we stay, I think for me, when I was going through the situation, I was isolated. I had been kicked out by my mother at the time, and I was young. And I felt like I had nowhere to go. A lot of my family I didn't talk to, or I didn't have access to. And so his family, actually, I was really close with his family. And they would tell me, of course, just stay. He loves you. He treats you better than, whoever else or whatever. This person had actually been very nice in the beginning, had, basically gave me all the attention I never had. I was in a single family home raised by my mom, and so I craved attention of a man anyways. What I notice now is another reason why I was even entertaining this relationship is he reminded me of my father, and I never put the two together until I was an adult. But his mannerisms, even some of his looks, how he carried himself, he was very just a lot of things. There were several things that reminded me of my father. And when I met this person, my father had already passed away, and I craved a relationship with my father. So to me, naturally, it was easy to be like, oh, this man treats me good. I get to claim some things I didn't have with my father. And we're going to be together forever. He never laid hands on me at first. He never was disrespectful. He worshiped the ground I walked on. And then as soon as I got pregnant, is when this person started putting hands on me. So I was actually engaged to this person. I was pregnant with his child, and he started beating me then. Okay. So it became, I was no longer his relationship or his girlfriend or this person he cared about. I was his property. And Born to Reach kind of touched on that a little bit, but that's exactly it. It was a switch that went off. Needless to say, my mom sent me away trying to break up that relationship. And when I came back, I was more adamant to be with him than when I was pushed away. So what happened in this scenario was, I obviously stayed. I found out I was pregnant. My mom, as soon as she found out I was pregnant, kicked me out. So I'm kicked out of my household. This is the only person I have. And then he starts hitting me. What am I supposed to do? I figure it's going to get better. I must have done something. That's what I felt, because anytime my mom and my dad would get into it, she would blame herself. Well, it's because I did something. And then as the time went on and I did start to try to reach out to my family, they would tell me, well, what did you do? Or you have to learn how to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm just like, these are people who have been abused, obviously themselves, telling me how to handle an abusive relationship. So that's why I can tell you what the signs were for me. He did isolate me. He constantly talked about my family and how his family treated me so much better. He never wanted to go around my family. I was always going around his family. When I got pregnant, his parents would do a lot of the getting prepared for the kids, obviously, because I was isolated from my mom. And then when he would hit me, he would always apologize. He would always be super sweet afterwards. He would always say that he loved me so much and buy me things. And to me, when you grow up and you see that relationship, and that's kind of how it went with my mom, it was like Q said, sometimes it becomes normal. When it becomes normal to you, it's like, it's dangerous, but you still also, I'm not sure if it was Born to Reach or Q. One of the two said, their mother's a fighter. My mom was a fighter too. So even though she was abused, that didn't mean she didn't try to fight back. And I was a fighter. I will fight back. Like, you're not just going to put hands on me and I'm not going to defend myself. So I'm not going to say that I didn't defend myself, but it got to a point where I was getting in fights, leaving, calling the police on this man, and the police were refusing to go to the call because they didn't want to have to chase after him. Like, he was mess to the point where if the police are scared of you, can you imagine in my scenario, how the hell do I get away? I would leave him. He would pop up at my house. We lived in a small town, so people would tell him where I was. So even if I tried to leave, people would lead him right back to me. So you have to be careful even when you're in these environments, when you get in a situation like that, sometimes your surrounding, keep people that love you and are solely for you around you, because I didn't have that. And so every time I tried to escape, it would get worse. And every time he got a hold of me, it was worse. So that makes it scary to leave. That's why for so long I just stayed, because it was like, well, dang, at least if I'm here, he won't beat me so bad the next time. That's how it started to feel. It felt like, well, I'm just doing this so that I can, maybe one day I'll get in a safe space so I can leave. But with everybody hands on me, I had to leave that town. I had to say a whole bunch of things about where I was and where I wasn't in order to stay safe. It's a lot of work to leave too. That's another reason. If you don't have anything and this person is taking care of you, and this person is in some cases the breadwinner, or if you're pregnant and they now say, well, you have my child, and they feel like your property, it's hard to leave. You have to prepare for those things. It's not as easy as, oh, I'm going to leave you, because you think they're going to let you leave. In most cases, they don't. So you need those encouraging people who will stand in and say, okay, well, if you leave, you can come be with me. I didn't have that. So when you're young and you're going through those things, that's why I say, don't be naive enough to say, well, that person keeps going back, because sometimes they feel like that's their only option and that's all they know, or their experiences with the situation and trying to get away, they don't see a way to do it at that time, but they still need support. So for me, like, I try to just be there as much as I can, but but also try to help them come up with a plan, because I think that's important too. When you don't see a way out, it's helpful to have somebody encourage it, but also not just tell me to leave. Have something to help me do so, because otherwise, what am I supposed to do? I had a child, I was young. I didn't have that much of, I was depending on whoever in his family, because I didn't have my family around. I wasn't sure I could just walk back into my family. There's a lot that goes into that. So just to be like, well, you should just leave. Don't be naive enough to think that your solution is going to be the answer either, is what I would say for someone who doesn't understand the whole situation and feels like, well, you could just go. You can't always, especially what if this person has been in a marriage for 10 years and then all of a sudden this behavior starts when they have kids, or something changes, and maybe they start cheating or whatever, and the person tries to stick up for this, because I've heard of this too, not my specific situation, but I've heard of a scenario where they try to stick up for themselves, and then the abusing starts, because they, like Born to Reach said, it's a control issue. So they want to gain that control and make sure that you're too scared to leave, because you are seen as a possession at that point and they don't want you to leave. But also, to me, I wanted to talk about what is the breaking point. Why do you actually leave? For me, what made me leave is I always wanted more. I always wanted better. And that's why I thought I was getting in that relationship. But when that turned out not to be the case, I immediately started planning alternate routes. I didn't want to stay with this person. But I also wanted to be safe, and I wanted my kid to be safe. So for me, I wanted to, and I'm just real quick in the comments, Q says a lot of them feel financially stuck. Again, exactly. So they put you in this bind. And I think sometimes, to be honest, we talked about independent last show, either on I can't remember if it was my show. No, it was actually L's show. And if you guys have not tuned in to watch I Am LJ, watch her show on Wednesdays, Wind Down Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Tune in. It's a good show. It's live. I'm always in there wrangling comments, as she likes to say, or sometimes I jump on, but she's awesome. We keep it real. We get to do what, basically she touches everything. She does also try to bring Q or another male perspective. And we do this because we want more from it. We don't just do it because we want likes. Likes are great, but at the end of the day, if we make a difference, that's more important. So that's why we do it. Anyhow, so Q also said that I've heard this before. And the reason why I brought up the independent thing is because some women, so we talked about on L's show, I don't think it was mine, we talked about how, and this wasn't saved, so that's why I really want to talk about what happened. We talked about independent women and how men they shy away from independent women. And my comment was, well, what do you mean by independent? Because the reason why I, myself, am very, very independent, even as a married person, and my husband allows that, and that's one of the things he loves about me, but also he does his part, and I respect him as the figure of my house. The reason why I am that way is because when you've been in a place that you've had everything taken from you, or someone's controlled you, or you've constantly been in situations like that, you become the person who feels like they have to have control of their own destiny, their own decisions. A lot of single moms or moms that have been through abuse are like that, and teach their children to be like that, because they don't want them to ever feel like they need a man for anything. It doesn't really have anything to do with you specifically. Sometimes it has to do with their experience. So I just wanted to put that out there, because we talked about it a little bit, but we didn't get deep into it. But I think now that we're talking about abuse and why people stay, I think it's important for you to know that sometimes when you've been with an abused woman, she may be overcompensating her independence for something that she had taken from her, or she felt like if she doesn't keep control of that, because it was fine in the beginning, if she doesn't keep control of that, then she may lose it again. There's a lot of that also happens. As far as the rest of the comments, IML says nowadays there are protective programs that help women of domestic abuse, helps them rebuild their lives, gives them clothes, housing, and help find them jobs. I mean, that's great. I don't know that I like I said, I lived in a very small town, and I think that was half of the problem too. I don't remember ever having that opportunity. And if I did, here's the thing. This person's family had been in that town for so long that everyone knew everyone. I was the person out, and he even knew the court system. That's why a lot of the times when I would call the police or I would go to court, he wouldn't get the reprimands he should get because they knew him or they knew his family. And please stop. If you're a judge, police officer, anything, or you have kids stop doing that. Please stop showing grace and mercy to people who deserve it, because you're making them worse. That didn't help him at all. It actually made him worse. And this person ended up being on drugs really heavy. But when you're in that situation, and then also this person is well in the environment and things like that, please stop being that judge or that police officer or whatever. I'm not saying it's all, but I had nowhere to go. I really felt like that. I had to hide where I was going just to get away. So it's important. But what made me push was my kid. My kid is the reason why because for me, once I had a child, there was no more. I don't care if I died getting away. I was getting away. That to me was a reason why I did a lot of things. And to me, I don't understand once you have a child how that protective state does not take over, I guess. I've always been protective of children. We'll talk about it a million times. But for me, when I had a child, I don't care if I had to actually, my son was kidnapped. And yes, even though it was his dad, he was kidnapped from my household. And I called the police. And I had to walk. They told me, well, even though I had a restraining order, even though I had all the paperwork, he came in my home while I was at work. Even though he did all of this, no one questioned him. No one did anything. I had to walk into that house, get my ass beat in front of his parents, and nobody called the police. The police refused to go. What do you do in that situation? So you can't make me understand how, someone can feel safe enough. Oh, that's their fault. You can't convince me that ever. But there are scenarios where we do hold on to certain people, or we hold on to scenarios. I will agree with that. We do normalize situations. That happens. We do have past that make us go into these relationships not even really being accountable for that. I can be accountable for it now. I can say, dang, that was really messed up. And the reason I entered that is looking for something I never had, which is what a lot of people do. Elle also said, there's also counseling. Q's Flavor says, right. And Elle says, everyone should have a level of independence no matter in a relationship or not. I agree with that. Who the hell was you messing with, Mafia? Wow. No, but you know what? I think some people, I don't know if anyone else has lived in a small town, but when you're raised in a small town, or you go to a small town and everybody knows everybody, man, look, it's hard when you start getting into some crazy situations because they feel like, well, I've known this person. I've dealt with this person. I know their family. I know their mom, and it would be better. Or his mom had a lot of kids. So it was like, well, this kid is causing her a lot of grief. It wasn't about me as a victim. It was about how they could make it better on whoever the person was that they knew. And it sucked. It really sucked. To a point where I would never, to me, I'm not going to live in a small town. Because I just don't like being away from everything. But it really, really made me feel isolated. So I would never do that again. And then she said, not a question for you to answer. I answered it anyway. I don't care. I'm not finna play with Elle right now. She's a little irritated with the situation. And then Q says, boom, boom, boom. And he also says sometimes people feel the person who you're dealing with is too connected. Sometimes it's true. Sometimes it's the brainwash that the person puts in their head. I agree. I agree with all of that. What's up, Trauma? Is it Trauma San Francisco? Trauma SF415. What's up? Welcome to my live. I cannot even talk. I've been talking for a minute right now, so that's probably why. But this is Transformation Tuesdays. I hope you continue to come. This is a part 2, so I did save part 1 in case you want to watch it later. But welcome. So we're basically just talking about, for anyone who comes in, why they stay, people in abusive relationships, and also why did they leave. From my experience, the reason I stayed was several reasons. The person was not who they were when I left them. They also reminded me a lot of my father, not in a pervy way, but in a way where I had lost my father and needed to feel loved, wanted to have a male around, which I notice now that I constantly was in a relationship. I don't think I had a single phase until after I left this person, and for obvious reason, I stayed single for a long time. But I wasn't interested in having a relationship after that for a while, until I met someone who I felt was obviously my husband now. But after that relationship, I did not settle, because who would, right? But some people do. Some people repeat this pattern over and over and over again. Let me see if I can add Born to Reach. Oh, he never came back, so can't do that. But anyway, do any of you guys have a follow-up as to maybe why you would have stayed, or why you feel like people stay, or even why people leave, or what gives them that final oomph to leave? What say you? And I did have a couple people on earlier, but it looks like they're both busy, so I have no one to pull with or from. But what about you, Elle? Are you busy right now? Just reaching out really quick to see if I can invite a couple people back. Bear with me, y'all. All right. So yeah, so some of the things we talked about earlier were just a village, and I think one of the things that we talked about earlier as far as the village, I feel like he had a village and I didn't at that point, and I think that made a difference. If I had a village, I think it would have made all the difference. And I think it's important, ladies, when you get into relationships, make sure you have your own relationships separate from them. And not to say something's going to happen, but just because I think it's important to have your own team rooting for you. It's important to have your own people, if that makes sense. It's fine to have joint people, but don't isolate yourself. I think it's important to befriend several people that you feel confident in, that you know you can trust. Don't settle for friends either. Just like you don't settle for a lot of things, but you don't have to settle for friends. You don't have to settle for who you're with. A lot of the time, if something is unsettled, then leave early. That's what I would say too. Like, don't stick around. I had red flags and I was just like, well, my mom dealt with that, or maybe I don't want to really be alone right now, or I'm pregnant and I don't want to have my kid. I didn't want my kid to be without a dad. There's a lot of that. But just be cautious. If you get red flags, question it. Step away early. Let them know it's not tolerated, so that the situations don't get worse and worse, because sometimes that happens too. Elle says, when they make that decision, I don't know what you mean by that. Not the business, dealing with baby. I don't remember what that part was for, but let's see. We also talked about earlier reporting domestic. Again, I feel like if I'm right there, it's not going to happen in front of me. But for the most part, if I see it even in public, I'm going to say something. How do you guys feel about having fights or arguments in front of your children? Like, I heard someone say that, and this was on like someone else's podcast or something like that. I just heard someone else was listening to it, and they basically said, that if you're fighting or you're witnessing a fight, then you should shoo your kids away. Like, you should be like, you go in the room or tell them to go away so that they don't interrupt the fight or get involved in the fight. And my thing is, the minute my son was a baby when I decided to leave, but if my kid was old enough to be in the middle of it, that would be one of the things where I would be like, I can't do this anymore. For me, once the baby starts having to get involved or feel a certain way about it, it's becoming a learned behavior. And now I could certainly say I'm glad I was gone by then, that it didn't continue that way, so I was able to teach a different way to my child. So that was important to me. Okay, Elle, I hear you. But anyhow, you guys, so this was the second part. I don't think I'm gonna have Born to Reach for the rest of the time. I'm gonna go ahead and call it for the night. Thank you so much for tuning in to Transformation Tuesdays, where we launch a war on trauma. And we try to just unpack some trauma and then reclaim some peace. It's so important that you take care of yourself, that you do the healing, that you do the accountability part of being responsible for your own healing. I'm Yolanda, Mrs. Y. Martin on Instagram. And thank you so much for coming in, for being vulnerable with me, for listening. If you ever have any questions, comments, want to come on with me and talk about things, if there's topics you want to touch on or talk about, I'm here. If even you are in a messed up situation and I talk about something that you've experienced and you want to talk about it, I'm here. DM me. I'm available. Don't ever feel alone. And just thank you guys for tuning in every week, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Have a blessed night.